When Kendry Rojas wins the 2028 AL Cy Young Award, remember, it was the Twinkie Town Tavern that told you first. Hello and welcome to the Twinkie Town Tavern, where the beer is cold, the Twins talk is hot, and the stools are always open. I'm your host, Josh Kolojeski, inviting you to grab a drink, pull up a chair, and let's talk about this 6-3 series opening win from your Minnesota Twins against the Houston Astros. Here's how it happened. Kendry Rojas makes his first MLB start, and it went about as poorly as you could imagine, at least through the first three hitters of Houston's lineup. Rojas loads the bases with nobody out in the top of the first, but he works his way out of the jam thanks to a line drive double play started by Brooks Lee. Rojas settles in and goes 4 innings with just 1 walk and 3 strikeouts, and in the meantime, Josh Bell awoke from his month-long coma to slug a couple of home runs, and Minnesota leads by a score of 3-0 early on. Simeon Woods Richardson, however, comes into the game, and he's going to piggyback off of Kendry Rojas and has a classic SWR scoreless inning where there's plenty of traffic, nothing is pretty, but it ends with a goose egg on the scoreboard all the same. Now, we interrupt this game recap for a rain delay. All right, and almost 4 hours later, we're back, folks. So is Josh Bell. He drives in his 4th run of the day before Luke Keyshaw brings in 2 as the Twins lead 6-0. But it wouldn't be a Twins game in 2026 without the bullpen raising the collective blood pressure of the state of Minnesota. This time, Justin Topa is the cause of that blood pressure elevation. He gives up 3, and he brings in the tying run to the plate before Eric Orsi replaces him. And gets out of the jam, paving the way for the first save of the second stint of Taylor Rogers' Twins' career. Minnesota holds on for the 6-3 victory. The Twins are in 3rd place in the AL Central at 22-26. They're 4.5 games back of first place Cleveland and just a half game back of Seattle for the final American League wildcard spot. Let's get into it here on the Twinkie Town Tavern. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful Monday night heading into Tuesday morning. Minnesota Twins are on a 2-game win streak, so starting to get some hope brewing a little bit more against a team that isn't great in the Houston Astros. That is not the same Houston Astros that you would typically envision, and maybe that's going to take some conditioning of our brains to remember that this is not the old Houston Astros team, but their lineup has still been solid. Yordan Alvarez, obviously, is one of the best, if not the best hitter in all of baseball. But it's been the pitching staff that has really given Houston fits, and Minnesota was able to take advantage of it while also having a great shutdown performance by Kendry Rojas in his first MLB start. Now, he had come in a couple of times earlier this year as either the piggyback guy, which is what Simeon Woods Richardson role was supposed to be today, and or just as a straight-up typical relief pitcher, and he had some trouble with his command, so coming into this first start, that was obviously going to be a big question mark, and he was limited, I believe, when I was listening on the radio to Chris Atterbury and Dan Glenn. They said that about 60 pitches would be where the Twins would have comfortably let him pitch to that point, get to that limit. So it's not as if he had a bunch of walks in the game that he would have lasted this long, but it's a good sign that he didn't. Rojas, I have been a huge fan of, and if you've watched the Twinkie Town Tavern, listened to the Twinkie Town Tavern ever since its inception back in March, then you know that I think Kendry Rojas has ace potential, and we saw that on display, albeit for just 4 innings in this game against Houston. Obviously not ideal to load the bases, and you kind of get bailed out by Houston swinging early in the count to get a infield pop-up that can't score any of those runs that are on the bases. And then the line drive double play to Brooks Lee, who makes the catch, throws it back over to first to turn 2 and get out of that jam. But from there, Rojas was dialed in the rest of the way. And he's a left-handed pitcher who has a excellent 3-pitch mix. It's the same 3-pitch mix, and I've said this multiple times on the podcast before, as former Twins left-hander Johan Santana. And it looks like, I guess, also maybe a 4th pitch was added for Rojas tonight, and that was a sinker that Baseball Savant has tracked. Typically, it had just been fastball, slider, changeup. That's what Johan Santana's pitch mix was for the most part during his prime with the Minnesota Twins. And Kendry Rojas had those pitches working for him. He got 42% swing and misses through all of his pitches, only 46 pitches in this game, and he got swings and misses on, again, over 42% of the pitches that were swung at by Houston hitters. So almost a coin flip as to whether they would even make contact with the pitch, regardless of if it's hard contact, soft contact, fair contact, foul contact. It's a flip of the coin to as to if there's going to be any sort of contact whatsoever on all of his pitches. And the changeup, he didn't throw a ton in this game. He relied more on the fastball and slider. But the changeup had a 50% whiff rate. So did the fastball, for what it's worth. And I think when you have all of those pitches working for Kendry Rojas, you get the sort of performance that we saw tonight. And hopefully as his career continues, those performances get extended as he continues to get stretched out in the Twins' starting rotation. Because, again, the biggest question mark was, would he be able to command those pitches? Because the stuff is there. 98-mile-per-hour fastball is like coming at you super, super fast, and then you shave 10 miles per hour off of it with the changeup, which has a lot of ride to it. It comes off of his left hand and slides down to the right so that it breaks away from right-handed hitters, and then his slider was also a strikeout pitch, a couple of strikeouts. 2 of his 3 strikeouts he got with the slider, one high to Isaac Paredes, and then one in the opposite batter's box down and away. So when you're getting those pitches, and when you're getting batters to swing at those pitches, it tells me that your tunneling is pretty good, or your release point is pretty consistent, and that was pretty much the case. Or at least, while the release point for Rojas maybe wasn't consistent per se, on Baseball Savant you can kind of see a huge blob. The good thing is it's not a couple of different blobs where all the changeups are coming from one hand position. All of the fastballs are coming from a little bit higher. They were all just the pitches coming out of the hand, and there was no rhyme or reason for as to why one pitch that was a completely different pitch than, like, why a fastball and changeup were at the same point at one point in the game, released at the same point from one point in the game, and then were released from another point later on in the game. Getting too complex and too wordy into the whole release point thing, but suffice to say that the tunneling was there because they're swinging at these pitchers that are falling off of the table. When you look at the plain numbers of pitches that went into the zone and out of the zone for Rojas, they were even. 23 pitches were in the zone, 23 were out of the zone. So if you're not getting guys to swing at those pitches that are out of the zone at some decent rate, then it's a completely different ballgame. You're getting into a lot more hitters counts, and they can get more hard contact. And as a young pitcher, maybe you start to spiral a little bit, but because his command of his fastball was excellent in this game, the slider and changeup worked off of that perfectly. So having those pitches is great, and being able to throw about 66% or so, 2/3 of your pitches for strikes, for a guy that has struggled with control and command throughout his minor league journey and through his brief time up at the major league level with Minnesota, that is an encouraging sign. And it seems like he is well on his way to take over the rotation spot. And I think the plan was for Simeon Woods Richardson to kind of see if he could get his bearings coming out of the bullpen as a piggyback to Rojas. And I don't know if Minnesota expected Rojas to go 4 innings. Derek Shelton in the postgame seemed a little bit pleasantly surprised that Rojas was able to give them that length in what was essentially a 2-starter game. But now it seems like maybe Simeon Woods Richardson won't get the opportunity to build himself back up because Kendry Rojas was able to have such a strong performance. What is it for SWR? 7.71 ERA or something coming into this game. And he does throw a scoreless inning, but it was a scoreless inning where it just doesn't look very good, where you're kind of clenching your teeth throughout the entire inning because you just know one of those pitches, one of those runs is going to come in. And there was a hard hit down the left field line, but thankfully it went right to the third baseman, Tristan Gray, who was able to fire across the infield and get the out. So it wasn't as if the one scoreless inning by Simeon Woods Richardson was like some excellent sort of pitching and he's all of a sudden found his way to execute and his way to have success for the rest of the season. That's certainly not the case, and we didn't get to see him go any longer because of the rain delay that happened. And it kind of reminds me of in Breaking Bad, there is an instance where one of the drug kingpins named Gus Fring, he has the main character Walter White working for him, making his meth because he has made it with such a high purity that no one has ever heard of. And this drug kingpin, Gus Fring, wants to have the very best quality and just dominate the market. However, he doesn't want to deal with some of the unpredictability, volatility, and disloyalty that comes from our main character. So he has a scientist, another chemist, kind of partner with our main character, Walter White. His name is Gale, and he is basically tasked to essentially just spy on what Walter White is doing so that he can learn how to up the purity of his meth so that he can take over for Walt and Walt can be disposed of, aka executed, and then Gus Fring doesn't have to deal with all of the character concerns that come from our main character, Walter White. And that is kind of what this Twins situation with Rojas and Simeon Woods Richardson has been like so far, where Simeon Woods Richardson, you are Walter White. You have, pitched well for us in the past. Obviously, I wouldn't put it's an imperfect analogy because I don't think he ever has performed as well as relative to how Walter White cooked meth as we continue to go deeper into this analogy. But Kendry Rojas is quickly learning from Simeon Woods Richardson how to be a starting pitcher, and just like that has taken over the role. All of that to say, it looks like it will be Rojas having that rotation spot, continuing to get stretched out. Maybe you still have SWR piggyback off of a couple of these because the Twins said that perhaps 60 pitches would be the limit for Rojas and then kind of stopped shy of that by letting him throw just 46. So he might need a couple more starts to get stretched out to what you'd like to see from your top starting pitchers in going 5-6 innings per start. That might take a little bit, throwing 100 pitches, 90 to 100 pitches per start. It might take 2 or 3 more starts to have Simeon Woods Richardson kind of piggyback. But then guess what, Simeon Woods Richardson? You're no longer needed. You have now become redundant, and it will be time to get rid of you, much like Gus Fring wanted to do to Walter White. Now, my only nitpick from Rojas' start, and it's not anything having to do with what Rojas could have done or couldn't have done better, is I would have liked to see him go to that 60 pitch mark. And I think knowing that there was a lot of rain coming. They were talking about it even on the broadcast, that we know this rain is going to come. We're expecting it around 6:30 local time, and it started a little bit earlier even. If you have a guy that's dealing the way that Kendry Rojas was and not really laboring outside of that first inning, and when he was laboring with the bases loaded, it was only a couple of pitches because the Houston Astros got themselves into outs so quickly and so efficiently that you're not really working with men on base too often in this start, and you're throwing strikes all the time. Your control has not been an issue. I think giving Rojas one more inning, one, setting him up to get a win in his first major league start, but two, knowing that, okay, then I can piggyback Simeon Woods Richardson maybe after the rain delay. I don't know if they, accounted for the rain delay lasting 4 hours, accounted for the rain coming in a little bit earlier than it was originally forecasted, but if you stay with that limit of 60 pitches, that's the effect that has. And then maybe you don't even need to see Justin Topa give up 3 runs, although maybe Simeon Woods Richardson, if he goes 3 innings after the rain delay, because Kendry Rojas went the 5 before the rain delay, maybe he gives up 3 runs, or even worse. I wouldn't obviously put that past Simeon Woods Richardson. So that's my only one little nitpick about this game is I think that it would have been great to see one more inning from Kendry Rojas, considering that he had not hit the limit that the broadcast at least was saying the Twins had put out for him of 60 pitches. Now let's move on to the offense for Minnesota, and there wasn't a ton of it. For the most part, maybe a little bit disappointing that a guy with a 9+ ERA entering the start in Tatsuya Imai was able to silence a lot of the Twins hitters, although it's been a small sample size for Imai. You still probably would have liked to see a little bit more, but Minnesota wasn't able to get a good feel for his slider. Outside of Josh Bell, all of a sudden starting to see the ball really well again. He gets his first home run since April 9th in the second inning, and then his very next plate appearance, he gets a 2-run shot. So it seems like he is busting out of his slump, and he is a player that can run hot and run cold. So now maybe we're starting to see that run hot part. I don't think we like to see run cold for a month and a half, and if we have another cold streak that lasts a month and a half and the hot streak is only, the 2 weeks, then we might have a little bit of a problem at first base / designated hitter, but maybe this can be a longer stretch of games where Josh Bell finds success, because all of a sudden now he is seeing the ball well. Not only does he get those home runs, but after the rain delay, he drives in the Minnesota Twins' first of 3 runs post-rain delay and finishes the day with 4 RBIs. And it's almost as if the Josh Bell that we left early in April kind of just snapped forward in time, ran on cruise control for the month and a half that followed, but his consciousness fast forwarded in time to May 18th, and it didn't miss a beat from that point. So it's good to see that from Josh Bell. Obviously, he's not a guy that is going to be heavily into the future of the Minnesota Twins, and he's kind of a 1-year stopgap for Minnesota that can provide you some veteran presence and former All-Star presence. But I think what it can give us some hope is maybe it won't take too much for Royce Lewis to turn back on. And now his slump has been much longer than the month and a half that Josh Bell's was. His slump has essentially been for the whole season, and you could even say for the last 2.5 seasons, dating back to the middle of the 2024 campaign. But Josh Bell was swinging and missing at nearly everything entering tonight's contest for the last month and a half. His whiff rate was super high. He wasn't putting good contact on the ball, wasn't squaring pitches up, and that's kind of been the problem with Royce Lewis, especially throughout the month of May, where his batting average has been just a bit above the 100 mark at 105, and he wasn't in the lineup today. But maybe it is as simple as once you see the ball well again, you can completely break out of the slump and put this stretch behind you. But obviously you would need to have that happen at the major league level. And I think if Royce Lewis was going to be demoted sometime this week, it would have been early in the week while the St. Paul Saints had their off day to kind of get everybody reacclimated. The Saints are in St. Paul for the second week in a row. Typically with the AAA schedule, it goes, you spend 1 week at home playing a series against just one team, and then the next week you're on the road. It just so happens that for the Saints, they are in St. Paul for this week after also being in St. Paul last week. So it was a perfect opportunity if you were going to demote Royce Lewis to do it on the Saints' designated off day, which is every single Monday. So maybe that gives us some inkling of hope that Royce Lewis will not be demoted. Maybe he just needs a few days off out of the lineup, and maybe he can see what Josh Bell is doing and regain some of the confidence in his swing, and maybe take some tips from Josh Bell about seeing the ball well again after Josh Bell had trouble seeing the ball for so long, and seeing, how quickly you can step back into success if you start to see the ball well. I don't have much hope that that's going to happen. I don't even have much hope that this Josh Bell performance today is anything more than just one good game. I'd like to see a run of that before, we declare too much that Josh Bell has busted out of his slump, but he's certainly provided the Twins with the offense they needed to win this game tonight. So kudos to Josh Bell. Let's hope that Royce Lewis can learn something from it, and maybe even some other, Twins hitters that have had their struggles, guys like Matt Wallner perhaps, although he's now in AAA, so he's not seeing Josh Bell firsthand, but it's the same sort of situation you'd hope for. Another unfortunate part from this game is that Ryan Jeffers left the game with what is being characterized as a wrist sprain, so one of your best hitters is injured. Byron Buxton still has not returned from his injury, although he's not on the injured list. It looks like he could be back soon. So your top two hitters so far this season now out of the, I guess we're kind of shortchanging Austin Martin by saying that Ryan Jeffers and Byron Buxton are definitively the top two hitters, because Austin Martin has had an excellent season so far as well. But I think there wouldn't be too much debate between Twins fans and between listeners of the Twinkie Town Tavern that Ryan Jeffers and Byron Buxton have probably been the top two offensive performances, even more so than Austin Martin. So you're going to have a stretch where I would assume with the wrist sprain, that's going to be something that puts Ryan Jeffers on the injured list for at least, the next 2 weeks. And you're obviously going to bring up a catcher, probably Alex Jackson. And Alex Jackson is going to be your backup most likely. His numbers at AAA don't give you much confidence that he would be able to hold on to a starting job. He is kind of your classic early 2000s backup catcher where it is really power or nothing. It is home run or nothing. He's hitting like 205 with 7 home runs and 15 runs batted in limited time down at St. Paul. So he's hitting home runs, but he's not necessarily hitting consistently with good contact all over the park, just out of the park on occasion. So it would be Victor Caratini then assuming most of the starts behind home plate, or maybe they just go with the platoon of one guy just taking against lefties, one guy just going up against righties, but probably more Caratini than Alex Jackson for the next couple of weeks. And Caratini has been good. We'll have to see if he's not a player that I would have confidence in filling the gap that Jeffers' absence will leave us in the lineup completely, but he can fill it up partially at the very least, and I think probably more so than Alex Jackson could. But Ryan Jeffers' bat will certainly be missed in this lineup for however long he is out. And then let's just hope that Byron Buxton is back within these next 2 days, even in this series before they head out on their 3-city road trip later on in this week. So Ryan Jeffers dealing with the wrist sprain. which is a shame because he had been hitting so well. And we also want to hope that he is the same hitter when he returns from that injury. You get out of swinging for 2 weeks, and maybe the muscle memory starts to fade back to old habits for Ryan Jeffers. And I am not analytical enough to break down a major league hitter's swing and the differences between it from last year and this year, but maybe there are old habits that made Ryan Jeffers just an above average, slightly above average hitting catcher, and that would prevent him, if he falls back into those bad habits after the wrist injury, that would prevent him from being the all-star caliber offensive catcher that he's been during the 2026 season. All of that is just prognostication, and we will see as the weeks come, and maybe he doesn't even go on to the injured list, but I think pretty soon he will be placed on the IL, and that will bring Alex Jackson up to the Minnesota Twins. Now, finally, we will end with Taylor Rogers getting his first save back with the team. You might remember he was an all-star, I believe, in the 2021 season, kind of took over the closer's role midway through 2019, was a closer in the 60-game 2020 season, was a closer for most of 2021, and then he was traded to the San Diego Padres along with Brent Rooker, all-star and Silver Slugger Award winner Brent Rooker, so that Minnesota could add a starting pitcher in Chris Paddock, and they replaced him. They also brought in Emilio Pagan in that move. And then since then, Taylor Rogers has had his up and downs, but he's probably had more success than not. Obviously, as he ages, that is going to start to wind down and has started to wind down just a little bit, but he's still one of the more reliable relievers for the Minnesota Twins. So it was nice to see him get rewarded with a save in this game. It is his first save of the season, and he is now the 8th player through 48 games. He is the 8th player to record a save for the Minnesota Twins this season. I don't think I could even name all of them off the top of my head. I know Luis Garcia and Justin Topa, who you might say are probably the worst out of the bunch. They both have 2. I know Eric Orzi has one. I believe Cody Funderburk has one. Yoendres, the new guy, I can't remember his last name, but he has one. When you say new guy, also, I guess I should probably be more specific, but the new guy that came over, I believe it was from the Rays on waivers, is Yoendres, but I can't remember his last name. But now Taylor Rogers gets to join that club. When the closer by committee comes around, it comes around in waves here, and it is a ever-growing, ever-expanding committee so far for your Minnesota Twins. All right, up next for Minnesota, they will continue their series against Houston tonight, and they can clinch a series win against the Astros, and I believe they can also clinch a winning homestand because they took 2 of 3 from the Marlins, just 1 of 3 from Milwaukee, but if they can win tomorrow, they will have 5 out of at least, well, at that point, 5 out of 8, and at the very worst, 5 out of 9 by the time the homestand is over. So they can win the series, they can have a winning record on the homestand if they can get the victory this evening. For Minnesota, it will be Zebby Matthews coming off of his first start of the season. It was an excellent one against the Marlins. He went 7 innings. He didn't walk anybody, so that's starting to be a trend. Taj Bradley, who had control issues, hasn't had them a ton so far under Derek Shelton, and I know Pete Mackey has been the guy that has kind of bridged both the Baldelli staff and the Derek Shelton staff, and he hasn't gone anywhere. But maybe just more time with Pete Mackey for these guys has kind of helped them fix some of their control and command issues because Zebby Matthews didn't have any walks, and Matthews wasn't really a guy that had control issues at the minor league level, and it was something that just only really manifested itself when he reached the majors over spurts in the last 2 seasons. But if he can find the control that he had in the minors and that he had in last week's performance, then we can start to see a little bit more of that because Matthews has really good stuff. It's not like to the level of Taj Bradley or Kendry Rojas, but it's still well above league average in terms of its metrics on MLB Pitch Profiler and on the Stuff Plus matrix on Fangraphs. He has good pitches, and he plays to those pitches well. And it's just a matter of getting that consistent control and not being afraid to attack hitters at the major league level. He did it last week. We'll see if he can do it again against a little bit more of a dangerous Houston Astros lineup. I know pitching has been their main Achilles heel so far this season, but I don't think the hitting has been what you typically see from Houston either, outside, obviously, of Yordan Alvarez. And then welcome back Lance McCullers. He had been out for like 2.5 years before finally making it back from a couple of different injuries last year with Houston. So far this year, though, it hasn't been great for McCullers, who is a big-time curveball pitcher. He's 2-3 with the 6.86 earned run average. Minnesota's going to have to sit on that curveball and look for that curveball coming from the right hand of Lance McCullers. Has a high ERA, another opportunity for the Twins to put up some runs, even with Ryan Jeffers and potentially Byron Buxton out of the lineup. So attack McCullers early, wait back on the changeup, take it the opposite way. When you do get that changeup, because it is a slow hook that has a lot of movement, but if you can read it out of the hand, it is a hittable pitch from Lance McCullers. So that is what the Minnesota Twins will hope for. That game gets started at 6:40 p.m. local time over at Target Field, so it should be a fun one if you guys want to go check it out. I'm sure there's going to be tickets available, walk-up tickets, get them on StubHub, wherever it is that you buy your tickets. And that is going to be the last call for us and for the Twins Talk this evening. Thanks for pulling up a stool and joining the conversation at the Twinkie Town Tavern. We'll be back here tomorrow night after the next one. Go Twins!